Finally, Election Day came. Americans voted, and now an anxious nation awaits the winner. Due to increased postal voting, some states will not consider the counting of the presidential ballots to be completed until Friday. Now, by the time you see this program, a winner may have been declared already. But as for now, the country faces a dual national crisis, putting aside the voting, a pandemic, and of course the economic devastation as a result of that. Voters were deeply divided on what mattered the most: containing the coronavirus or hustling to rebuild the economy. Hello and welcome to Decision 2020, a program on the U.S. election. I'm Kavitaf Waib. In this last episode of the program, we're going to take a look at where the Democrats and Republicans have failed. And if you're sick and tired of hearing about these two main parties in the U.S., stick around. We're going to have third-party guests featured in today's program, like special guest Howie Hawkins from the Green Party.
Election 2020 was a vote like no other before. Voters' main concerns were the U.S. collapsing economy and the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. America got divided. People's opinion of which was more important fell along starkly partisan lines. Those who viewed the pandemic as the most pressing issue favored Joe Biden for president, and U.S. citizens who named the economy and jobs broke overwhelmingly toward re-electing Donald Trump.
I usually consider myself more conservative, but I think this time around I've definitely had to take a step back and look at the candidates each individually versus just voting for the party that I normally do.
Biden's supporters said they believed the country was heading in the wrong direction, while Trump had attempted to focus the campaign on anything other than the pandemic. It remained a defining issue. More than 4 in 10 voters said it was the most important problem facing the country, far more than any other issue. Americans who believe Trump should be re-elected said that as important as it is to beat the pandemic, only about 1 in 5 voters considered the virus the top issue affecting their vote. More said the economy decided their ballots. The U.S. economy suffered a blow from the coronavirus pandemic. Unemployment hit record lows and the stock market experienced a heavy crash.
The polls across the United States have finally closed. Everyone has voted. Now it's time to ensure that every vote counts.
Every vote counts! Count every vote!
There's the possibility that one candidate might declare victory prematurely.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Or that he might try to delegitimize some aspect of the election by making unfounded claims.
We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
Leaders of democracies around the world have an important role to play in guaranteeing that the ballot of every voter counts.
We want all voting to stop.
It seems that this election has deepened the divisions among Americans, like what these people are saying.
Trump is a madman. He's out of control. You know, I hope we win Joe Biden because I'm a Democrat. He's not for the people. He's for himself and the people that are around him. And most of all, he's for the rich and the wealthy people.
I want Trump to win so badly because I think our country is going to go downhill fast with Biden. He just doesn't do things like they should be done. He has no courage to go ahead with things that need to be done.
A couple of views there from Americans. Obviously, it shows the deep divide that exists in terms of the viewpoints on Biden and Trump. Okay, today we're very privileged to have with us Howie Hawkins. He's a Green Party presidential candidate for the 2020 elections. Howie Hawkins, welcome to Decision 2020. First, please tell us about your party and what it stands for.
Well, Kaveh, the Green Party represents policies that the majority of people in this country want, like Medicare for all, a universal publicly funded healthcare system, So everybody's got coverage, particularly in this COVID pandemic. Like a Green New Deal. I was the first candidate in this country to campaign for a Green New Deal back in 2010. Our biggest problem is getting heard because our media in this country just covered the two major parties. And it's even harder than getting on the ballot, which is difficult in this country. So I think those are some of the things that distinguish us from the Democrats and Republicans.
It's military might across the world, with all the bases that it has, I think over 650 up to 700. Its military budget equaling the military budgets of maybe 7 countries combined. Why does the U.S. feel that it has to be the world's policeman, do you think?
Well, our policy in the Green Party is, instead of being the world's global military empire and dominating all these economic institutions like you mentioned, the International Monetary Fund, we should be the world's humanitarian superpower. Make friends instead of enemies, provide aid instead of arms. And we believe by offering aid instead of arms, we're going to do more to promote peace and security for everybody than getting involved in all these military conflicts.
All right, Howie, final question to you. The U.S. administration led by Donald Trump, well, you talk about international treaties. He's pulled out of them, like the Paris Climate Accord. We could talk about also the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, it just seems like he wants to change the world order based on how he sees it and what is good for America, hence his slogan, Make America Great Again. How do you see that moving forward, and what are your views on that?
Well, it conveys the message that the United States government can't be trusted because we agree to a treaty like with Iran, that nuclear deal, and then we pull out. We pulled out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The excuse was the Russians were deploying intermediate range missiles that were in violation of the treaty. Well, if that was the case, the treaty was there as a mechanism to bring them back into compliance. Treaties are ways we cooperate, and you just pull out of the treaties. I mean, Trump has a unilateralist approach to the world.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Howie Hawkins, Green Party presidential candidate. We appreciate his comments on this. Well, let's get back to some of the other topics at hand here, and we're going to zoom in on Trump supporters, how they believe that he actually can salvage the economy and overcome the pandemic. But in this case, we're going to zoom in on what Biden supporters actually think.
The overwhelming majority of Trump supporters call the economy excellent or good. This is while an equal share of Biden supporters said it was doing poorly. Views of the virus also cleave to politics. Roughly 4 in 5 Trump supporters called it at least somewhat under control, while as many Biden voters said it was not at all under control. Those who reported that the pandemic had taken a personal toll tended to back Biden. More than a third of all voters said they or someone in their household had lost a job or income over the past 8 months. And most of those voters favored Biden. Americans who did not vote in 2016 were Trump campaign's target. The campaign believed that this group would be key to re-election, but figures show that these first-time voters chose Biden by wide margins.
Okay, we're back. We're joined in this segment by Jeremy Spike Cohen. He's a Libertarian Party VP candidate for the 2020 presidential election. Jeremy Spike Cohen, welcome to Decision 2020. First question, your party, tell us what it stands for. Tell us your ideals, your platform, and the things that you actually promote.
Absolutely, Kaveh, and thank you so much for having me on. The Libertarian Party is different from the other two parties because we believe that people do best when they are most free. We believe that we've seen the outcome of policies that are based on the presumption that government knows best. It is why we are seeing the cost of living spiraling out of control. It is why we are seeing this pandemic completely being running roughshod over our lives, and lockdowns which failed to slow the spread of the virus, succeeding only in destroying our economy. It's why we see trillions of dollars being stolen from everyday Americans and being handed out to billionaire cronies who bought and paid for Republican and Democrat politicians to be in office. We recognize that the only way to fix the problems that have been created by the people in power is to dismantle the systems they've created, to take that power and that freedom and wealth that's been stolen from us and put it back in the hands of the people where it always belongs. We believe that the American people do best when we are at peace with the world instead of constantly at war around the world. We believe in ending the wars and bringing the troops home. We believe in a non-interventionist strategy overseas. We believe in peace. We believe in prosperity. We believe in trade and good relations with anyone who wants it with us. and we believe that the purpose of a military is only for direct defense.
Very well. Thank you very much for that. Comments there by Jeremy Spike Cohen, Libertarian Party VP candidate for the 2020 presidential election. We appreciate his comments. Now, let's go and see what people have said about some of the issues at hand on social media to get more insight about this election. First one from Mark L. They say that the popular vote doesn't matter, but it does to Trump's ego. Trump hates that he lost the popular vote to Hillary. Still to this day, he will once again never live it down with Biden. Looks like that's what's happening with this presidential election. Next tweet from Joe Richardson once again proved that America is a 50-50 country. Biden's presidency, the system, and the country all look weak as a result, and we're still yet to see if Donald's got a trump card. Trump card, he asks. Maybe that comes in the form of the Supreme Court, which is something that Trump has threatened to do if he doesn't agree with the votes, contesting it, that is. Well, moderate voters also swung heavily in this election for Biden in a tacit rejection of the radical label that Trump had sought to pin on him. Let's see how.
Throughout his term, Trump has alienated moderates with his rhetoric and was never seen favorably by most independent voters. It was these voters at the center whom Biden had most aggressively targeted. Biden's campaign used a message of unity and American tradition to offer voters a respite from the bombast of the current president and to push back against the Trump campaign's portrayal of the Democrat as a tool of the left.
The 2020 U.S. presidential election seems to be like no other vote. Previous contests have been rancorous and some were described in existential terms, but never, at least in recent times, have Americans faced the realistic prospect of the incumbent rejecting the outcome of the vote. The U.S. president appeared in the White House just after 2 a.m. on Wednesday to brazenly claim that he had already won the election and to insist that votes be stopped in terms of their count, even though the ballots of millions of Americans had yet to be tallied. Now, since Trump made these comments, many have raised concerns about the possibility of a crisis in the coming days. Donald Trump has been for a long time saying that he's not going to give up power that easily. Now, does this mean that America is on the verge of chaos?
The 2020 election is turning into a nail-biter as the vote count could extend for days. People are running out of patience, and nobody's more impatient than the U.S. president. Speaking with a mix of defiance, anger, and wonder that the election hadn't yet been called in his favor, Donald Trump recounted his standing in an array of battleground states before falsely declaring,
We were getting ready for a big celebration. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off.
No news organizations declared a winner between Trump and Biden, and a number of closely contested states still have millions of mail-in ballots to count. But what the president said worried many. They believe that Trump's statement, along with his tweets, amounted to a reckless attack on the democratic process during a time of deep anxiety and division in the United States.
Trump has time and again said that he is not in favor of a peaceful transition of power. So politically speaking, does this mean a possible crisis?
Hasn't he already said that if he loses, he's going to dispute it anyway? I mean, so he already stated that. If he loses in any type of way, he's not going to lose graciously. He's going to make a big deal about it. He was cheated in any type of way.
It's like I flipped on the news, and I could see that it's running close in a lot of places, and like Wisconsin is important, and we were looking really good, I think, for a while, up until kind of earlier this morning, we started looking like it's going more Biden. Yeah.
I mean, we had so many of these great sound bites from Americans out on the streets that were relaying the way that they viewed both candidates, well, the incumbent and also Biden. But unfortunately, we could only show some of them. Our guest for this segment is Angela Walker from the Green Party. She's the VP candidate for the 2020 presidential election. Angela, welcome to Decision 2020. Again, we did speak to Howie Hawkins, but we'd like to hear from you what you believe in terms of your party, your platform, your ideologies, etc.
Good evening, Kaveh. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm a member of the Green Party of the United States, and our party is different from the Democrats and the Republicans by the simple fact that we do not take corporate donations. We are completely people funded. And the campaign that we are running is centered around what is good for the planet. And that means breaking away from big fossil fuels, nuclear, continuing with nuclear, and also ending the practice of fracking in this country, which the Democrats and the Republicans are neither one of those are going to do that.
Indeed. Well, although there have been reassurances from Mitch McConnell over a smooth transition, what could go wrong should this not happen in the way you see it?
I can't say for certain what is going to happen. There have been remarks made by the person who is currently occupying the White House that this is not, should he not win, should his party not win, that there may not be an easy transition. I cannot honestly say that I know how this is going to turn out.
Final question to you. What do you think about the mail-in ballots? I mean, we know that these are uncertain times. And when I say uncertain, it's about the way that Trump has received the mail-in ballots that he says shouldn't be counted. Can you please tell us what you think about them, and could this actually prove to be the Democrats' claim to victory?
I would say yes. Being that this is unprecedented, we're dealing with unprecedented conditions because of the COVID pandemic, that people are, there's a lot of uncertainty around the mail-in ballots and whether they're going to be handled the way that they're supposed to be handled. There's a lot of questions, and looking forward to November 3rd, there's a lot of possibilities that can happen that day. So we're just hoping that polling places are prepared with all that they need, that people are able to work in those polling places to make sure that voter intimidation and suppression is not happening. And, at this point, we're just going to hope that, everything runs the way that it needs to. But, at this point, anything can happen.
Indeed. Thank you. That is Angela Walker, Green Party VP candidate for the 2020 presidential election. We do appreciate her thoughts. Well, Trump's main criticism is towards the mail-in voting system, which many Americans actually used, as we have been seeing, due to the ongoing pandemic.
Throughout the campaign, Trump has been claiming, without evidence, that the use of mail-in ballots would lead to widespread fraud.
I think it was a terrible decision for our country, and I think it's a very dangerous decision, because you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 states, depending on how it ends up, where they're tabulating ballots, and the rest of the world is waiting to find out. And I think there's great danger to it, and I think a lot of fraud and misuse can take place.
He repeated that claim on Wednesday morning. Trump then quickly invoked America's highest court, where there is a solid conservative majority, suggesting it might intervene to deliver him victory. Any potential legal challenge would have to be filed on a state-by-state basis in either state or federal court before winding its way up to the Supreme Court. The courts are unlikely to halt counts in general, but the Trump campaign may argue that certain ballots were cast unlawfully, for example.
We have reached our final guest in this program. He is Merlin Miller, former U.S. presidential candidate from the American Eagle Party. Merlin Miller, welcome to Decision 2020. Please tell us about your party, about yourself, what you stand for, and how you are different from the other 2 main parties in the U.S.
Thank you, Kavi. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I was actually recruited into politics several years ago by a small independent party called the American Freedom Party. My platform was a little bit different than the parties, and ultimately in 2014 we formed a party called the American Eagle Party. And our intention was to run a significant candidate as her presidential candidate in 2016. And I think President Trump has had all kinds of opposition from the globalist forces, which include our mainstream media. And this may not be something that the Iranian people believe or want to hear, but I do believe long term that President Trump would be our best choice for peace in the world. He certainly has not started any new wars, and he's doing what he can to get America back to its traditions, back to its foundations. So it's a very tough election year right now. I don't know how things are going to unfold, but I think the American people need to get the facts and not just trust in America's mainstream media.
That has never really happened before. And that doesn't really spell democracy for a country that claims to be the flag bearer of this notion. What are your thoughts about his stance on that?
I do believe there's a good chance that this election will be disputed by whichever party is supposedly the losing party. It's a very unusual election this year in that the absentee balloting process is really changing things significantly. In the past, it was very limited, but now there's mass mailings going out, and I believe it's ripe for a lot of fraud and corruption. So it's got to be carefully conducted, and we'll see how things go. But I do suspect there'll be some delays in reporting and collecting the ballots. And I do believe as a result of that, there could be some legal challenges by whichever party is not the prevailing party.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for that. We do appreciate it. That was Merlin Miller, former U.S. presidential candidate at the American Eagle Party. You notice how he said that he also thinks that there's going to be some disputes that are going to happen because of the results, or the disputed results. And that is exactly what's going down at this point, coming, of course, from the Trump side. Now, we are going to take a look at some tweets and see what people think. The first comes from Cherry's Rome Nilsson. No matter how the rest of this election plays out, there is one thing that's apparent. We have an extraordinary amount of work to do. The racism, selfishness, lack of common decency in our country is appalling. We all need to do better, or to be better human beings. Indeed, that is one thing that has gone to the wayside based on the polarized, I should say, atmosphere that exists in the country coming from the top down, from the U.S. president, that is. Next one from Nathan. I'm amused with how I'm seeing people say, I hope Republicans learn this and I hope Democrats learn that. Everyone does realize that no one is going to learn anything, right? State of confusion there coming from Nathan. Perhaps that is something that is going on with this election. We know that it's not just one party having overlapping ideas. They both are very far apart when it comes to their platform. Now, conflict experts say that it's not inevitable that an election or its aftermath could evolve into chaos, but it's crucial for political leaders on all sides to de-escalate tensions in case there's a long, contested election.
Political experts say if the U.S. president prematurely declares victory when states are still counting ballots, it would amount to a coup, even if it involves legal fights and no military action. Trump's remarks cannot change the election process, but what he said added another bizarre twist to one of the most extraordinary election cycles in the U.S. history. For weeks leading up to Election Day and in voting across the country on Tuesday, Americans overcame their fears of the coronavirus in an attempt to bring the campaign to a conclusion, with the fate of Trump's tumultuous White House reign hanging in the balance.
And that does it for today's edition of Decision 2020, our last program. Hope you enjoyed it. This U.S. election is not the whole story, or actually the important story. Yes, there will be a president of the White House who will do his thing, but what about the state of the U.S.? A country which, well, it has been bruised badly from the Trump shenanigans. But is Trump to blame actually for that, or was he just a conduit that brought all these feelings that Americans had to the surface, which has resulted in the polarization of this country? Well, as far as Iran is concerned, this is what we think about the U.S. election.
در مورد آمریکا سیاست ما یه سیاست حساب شده و مشخصی است و این سیاست با رفت و آمد اشخاص تغییر پیدا نمی‌کنه.
And we just heard Iran's leader's stance is something that the U.S. has been against. Countries who stand on their own 2 feet, who show their individualism, is something that the U.S. cannot stand. At least so far, that's how it's been vis-a-vis Iran. That does it for today's program. I've been Kaveh Taghi, and on behalf of the whole team here at Decision 2020, thanks for watching.